Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the podcast. And today I'm going to go my review of AEW's Dynamite. Starting off the evening, we go to our first match of the night. It is a tag team matchup. It is Jon Moxley teaming up with Claudio Castagnoli versus FTR. I thought this was a good match to start AEW last night. Back and forth matchup between both teams with FTR keeping the pace of the match. Moxley and Wheeler then both exchange in the middle of the ring with Claudio hitting a giant swing on Dax Hardwood. Dax and Moxley then both exchange in the middle of the ring with Dax applying a sharpshooter on Mox, and then Claudio applies a sharpshooter of his own on Cash Wheeler. The hold is broken. Dax then hits a pile driver on Claudio, and the bell sounds. Match ends in a draw, and after that, Mox and Claudio and FTR have a brawl after the match. AEW security come to the ring to stop the fight. A couple things I want to say about this, man, quickly. Number one, this was a solid match to start AEW Dynamite last night, like I had said. Two, I know a lot of people might be confused at what's going on and why, the BCC is going up against FTR and what happened with the superstars from CMLL. I kind of touched bases on this last week, but I will reiterate kind of what I was talking about last week. I don't think the storyline between CMLL and the Blackpool Combat Club is going to be done. I think, the CMLL superstars had to go back to Mexico, back to that promotion, and do some work over there. I think Claudio, or the Blackpool Combat Club for that matter, are supposed to go over to CMLL. I believe it's March 29th from what I've been told, for an event for the CMLL promotion. So I don't think that whole storyline there between the Blackpool Combat Club and the superstars from CMLL is done. I just think right now there was other obligations for those other superstars. But with this match alone, to me, after this match took place, we had FTR and having a promo backstage with Renee, and they were in the parking lot area backstage, and they were talking about this match with Moxley and Claudio, and saying that the match is not over. They want a rematch, yada yada yada. And then obviously Jon Moxley and Claudio come backstage. They try to get the face to face with Dax and Cash Wheeler. AEW security is trying to separate both teams. So to me, honestly, I think this match, there will be a rematch, and I think that match will take place at Revolution, because I'd be very surprised if we don't see Mox and Claudio a part of Revolution in any kind of capacity. So I definitely think the rematch between Moxley, Claudio, and FTR will take place at Revolution. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night. It is Orange Cassidy versus Mike Bennett. Orange Cassidy quickly attacks Mike Bennett and Matt Taven on the ramp. The match itself was a decent match, back and forth matchup between Cassidy and Bennett, with Orange hitting a Stundog Millionaire on Mike Bennett in the middle of the ring. Roderick Strong comes down to the ring to cause a distraction with the referee, which allows Mike Bennett to hit a low blow on Orange Cassidy. Bennett then hits a pile driver on Cassidy for a near fall. Bennett then hits a Death Valley driver on the outside on Orange Cassidy. Orange Cassidy gets up, hits a desperation orange punch on Mike Bennett. Bennett then gets up, hits another pile driver on Orange Cassidy, but Orange Cassidy ultimately hits a beach break on Mike Bennett, pins him for the 3, and your winner of the match is Orange Cassidy. After the match, Undisputed Era comes down to the ring to attack Orange Cassidy, and then Jake Hager comes down to the ring to attack Undisputed Kingdom and save Orange Cassidy. A couple of things I want to say about this, man. Number one, it's great to see Jake Hager back. Obviously, was I completely surprised? No, I was surprised that he came out to help Orange Cassidy. I think it's been a while since we've seen Jake Hager. I think the last time we've seen Hager, he was doing stuff with, obviously the Inner Circle, or not Inner Circle, the JAS. So, again, it's been a while since we've seen Hager. Obviously, he got a huge pop, being the fact that they were in Tulsa, Oklahoma last night, and Jake Hager is from Oklahoma. So it was great to see Jake Hager back. I don't know how he fits into the mold with Orange Cassidy right now as far as storyline's concerned. But nonetheless, it's great to see Jake Hager back into the fold in AEW. And honestly, I'm looking forward to this not possible, but this matchup between Strong and Orange Cassidy at Revolution for the International Championship, man. It's going to be a really good matchup between Cassidy and Strong. After that, we have a Ric Flair backstage segment. He pulls up in a SUV. He is approached by Renee. Renee wants to get a word with Ric Flair. Flair says that he is disappointed that he is not more involved in Sting's last match. Seems like Flair has some frustration with that. Flair says that he's exploring his options in AEW, which, again, is kind of odd. And then Flair visits the Young Bucks. He goes up to the Bucks locker room and says, "Hey, can we talk?" And then Flair goes into the locker room with the Young Bucks. To me, this was very interesting, man. This is one of the most interesting parts of one of the interesting parts from last night's show, man. To me, honestly, I was kind of taken back by this, to be honest. I know Flair, a lot of people were against Ric Flair showing up in AEW, and some were actually surprised, myself included, that he was actually going to show up in AEW, especially with all the work that he's done with WWE. And Flair's been a part of Sting's last match here and there. He's been obviously ringside during Darby and Sting's matches and stuff like that, but it seems like Flair wants a more predominant role in Sting's last hurrah, his last match. Flair visiting the Young Bucks last night. See, to me, this was the biggest thing that popped in my head was people had to remember that Flair is the dirtiest player in the game. And that's one of the biggest things that Flair is known for. So if Flair is going to possibly align himself with the Young Bucks, and I told you guys this, I believe, last week or 2 weeks ago, that in Sting's last match, I could possibly see Sting lose at his last match, and the Young Bucks win the AEW Tag Team Championships at Revolution, and Sting walks out with a loss. And I know that might be a lot, that might be a crazy idea thinking that, but just hear me out here. I think with what Flair did last night, with talking to the Young Bucks, it's a very good possibility that Flair could be the one that turns his back on Sting and has Sting lose his last match and allows the Young Bucks to get the win over Sting and for the Young Bucks to become the new AEW Tag Team Champions with the help from Ric Flair. I could totally see that. I mean, especially with what the Young Bucks have been doing, if you see the vignettes and stuff like that, the video packages, if you will, since the Young Bucks have been back with this whole EVP, storyline and stuff like that, with the jets and the nice cars and stuff like that, it does give off Ric Flair vibes. So to have the Young Bucks align themselves with Ric Flair, we're going to see how it goes, man. But to me personally, I would not be 100% shocked if Flair ends up joining the Young Bucks, or Flair gets involved in Sting's last match, which allows Sting to lose his last match in AEW due to the fact that Flair wanted a more predominant role and have more of an impact on Sting's final match in AEW. So again, stay tuned to this, man, because I think this whole thing with Flair and Sting is definitely going to heat up leading up to Revolution. So I'm definitely looking forward to that. Moving on from that, we have a Daniel Garcia segment. He walks down to the ring. He is met with Tony Schiavone. Schiavone announced that Adam Copeland is injured and he will not be going up against Christian Cage for the TNT Championship, which, again, if you guys saw the match that Copeland recently had, he was attacked by Christian Cage, which also led to a concerto. And it seems like, according to Tony Schiavone, Copeland is injured and he will not be wrestling at Revolution. Instead, Schiavone announced that Daniel Garcia will get the TNT opportunity at Revolution. He will face off against Christian Cage for the TNT Championship. Garcia then grabs the microphone and he hypes up the fans, says he wouldn't be here if it wasn't for the fans. Cage is at the ramp. Christian says that Copeland will never, ever get another TNT opportunity. Christian says the match at Revolution with Garcia shouldn't happen and says that Garcia isn't ready for a match against him for the TNT Championship. Christian then mocks Garcia as well as his family. Christian says that he wants to be Garcia's dad, which I thought was absolutely insane. After that, Nick Wayne rushes the ring to try to attack Garcia. Garcia fights off Nick Wayne. Killswitch goes to the ring as well, but Matt Menard ends up attacking Killswitch to stop Killswitch from attacking Daniel Garcia. So it looks like we are getting this match between Daniel Garcia and Christian Cage for the TNT Championship. I'm all for it, man. I think Daniel Garcia is really coming into his own. And, the storyline and everything else like that. The match he had with Copeland obviously didn't go the way, obviously, Garcia wanted it or Copeland. But then again, Daniel Garcia, like I said, is really coming into his own. This is going to be a really, impromptu match and a showcase match, if you will, for Daniel Garcia, especially being in a championship matchup in that caliber, especially against Christian Cage. So it's going to be one hell of a match of Revolution, and I'm definitely looking forward to it. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night. It is Tony Storm versus Sidney Winnell. It was an okay match, man. It was a glorified squash match. Tony Storm was keeping the pace throughout the entire match, with Tony hitting a Storm Zero and then ultimately applying a submission hold, and your winner of the match is Tony Storm. After the match, Deonna Purrazzo music hits. She walks down for her match when she faces off against Madison Rayne. I thought it was a decent match between Purrazzo and Rayne. Purrazzo was keeping the pace throughout the match, and then Purrazzo ultimately applies an ankle lock on Madison Rayne. Rayne taps out, and your winner of the match is Deonna Purrazzo. After the match, Tony rushes into the ring, and Tony applies an ankle lock on Deonna Purrazzo. Tony Storm is kind of sending a message to Deonna for their matchup at Revolution. Moving on from that, we have a Darby and Sting segment. They are backstage. Darby talks about Sting, talks about special moments. He grabs a picture from Sting, and the picture is Sting with his kids. When Sting, I think it was a picture of Sting when he was with the NWO Red and Black, the Wolfpack, and it showed a picture of Sting with his kids. And Darby talks about the fact that the Young Bucks attacked Sting and himself and his kids a week or two ago, or last week, on Dynamite, and how much it meant to Darby to get revenge on the Young Bucks for that. Darby then talks about, his history in wrestling. He also mentions that his father had passed away recently, and talks about how much his father meant to him. But Sting also talks about the fact that when his dad passed away, he realizes that Sting is not immortal, and that everything has to come to an end, and he realizes that his wrestling career is coming to an end. But if you look at look on the face of Sting, man, you could tell Sting was upset. You can tell, obviously, with the passing of his dad, obviously. But you can also see that Sting, is ready for this match at Revolution. And to me, honestly, this match needs to main event Revolution in Greensboro, North Carolina, and especially it being Sting's last match. I think Sting, with what he's done in AEW, and not just what he's done in AEW, his career, man, Sting's had one hell of a career. And he's wrestled everywhere. You're talking from Japan to WCW, obviously, the late stages of NWA. He's wrestled over, obviously, in other promotions as well. WWE, TNA. Sting has wrestled literally all over the world and has made a humongous name for himself in his career. Absolutely. And to see Sting have his final match March 3rd, it's going to be insane, man. It's going to be absolutely insane. But I'm definitely looking forward to it. This match is a high-profile matchup. It's for the AEW Tag Team Championships. But like I told you guys earlier, knowing that Ric Flair was talking to the Young Bucks and the fact that he is the dirtiest player in the game, I would not be surprised if we see Ric Flair somehow have the Young Bucks go over in Sting's last match. I wouldn't be surprised. This is also, Flair has a lot of praise for Sting, but, it's also one of Flair's biggest rivals. So, I would not be surprised, especially with Flair talking to the Young Bucks, if, Flair is a part of this matchup, but teaming with the Young Bucks. So I would not be surprised. So stay tuned for that. Moving on from that, we have a Wardlow segment. A lot of segments last night on Dynamite. This one actually was one of the other interesting things that happened last night on Dynamite. Wardlow comes down to the ring, grabs the microphone, says he's automatically, just right off the rip, says he's pissed off. Wardlow says that he was supposed to be the next big thing in AEW and all of wrestling. Wardlow says that he was supposed to be AEW World Champion a long time ago. He also mocked CM Punk and MJF, and he says he wants, a challenge in AEW. Now, when I saw this last night, man, I was kind of surprised. I was shocked. I was like, wait a minute, man, is somebody listening to me when I've been saying? Because I've been saying this same shit about Wardlow for the past weeks, months, when it pertains to Wardlow. I mentioned this so many times, and I was like, wow, maybe somebody's listening. I'm not trying to shoot for the moon here, but I think someone's listening, because this is exactly what I wanted from Wardlow. I've been patiently waiting for this kind of moment last night from Wardlow. We're to a point where Wardlow was pissed off, he had enough, and he wants a challenge. Because nobody wants to see, and I mentioned this so many times, man, nobody wants to see Wardlow get an opportunity at Samoa Joe or whoever is the AEW World Champion and be the number one contender with only beating enhancement talent. And I literally had mentioned this last week. So to see Wardlow grab this microphone and say exactly what the hell I've been saying for the past few months about him, and that he needs a challenge, and have him say that last night, man, I was actually shocked. This was a great segment from Wardlow, and I mentioned this last week, man, there's other competitors right now in AEW, whether they're injured or come back from injury, or even superstars right now, that could be a great challenge for Wardlow's journey to get to the AEW World Championship. It could be Lance Archer, it could be Powerhouse Hobbs, it could be Miro. Again, Miro would be a great competitor against Wardlow. Keith Lee, once he returns from injury. Give this man some competition. And after what he said last night, Wardlow wants to be a main eventer. He wants to be a main eventer. He wants to be in the main event scene. And he feels as if he should have been a main eventer and in the main event scene for a long time now. And it's well overdue for Wardlow. And for not for nothing, I do think with this last night also, the flip side of that coin, this is Wardlow's last chance. And what I mean by that is Wardlow put this mission statement out last night about what his intentions are and what he wants to do. And the fact, he's tired of being in the back of the line and he wants to be the top dog for AEW, who wants to be in the main event scene. But this is the last straw for Wardlow. And I don't 100% blame Wardlow for this. I really don't. I think Tony Khan really did drop the ball with Wardlow creatively, and the matches that he put together for Wardlow. Yeah, Tony Khan is just as much to blame on this as well. But me as a fan of Wardlow, yeah, to me this is Wardlow. For me, it's last chance for Wardlow, because after this, what's next? You know what I mean? I think this is something where, okay, Wardlow said what he said last night. Tony Khan and AEW and the creative team that he has, which I will talk about later on in the podcast with some of the news that come out with AEW as of last night. Tony Khan and his creative team need to, put pen to paper for Wardlow and actually give him storylines and give him really, top-notch matches to really build up Wardlow, especially when it pertains to him chasing after the AEW World Championship. Because like I said a numerous amount of times, man, you cannot keep giving Wardlow enhancement talent, local independent talent, for him to literally go into the ring for 2 minutes, 3 minutes tops, hit a power bomb, go for the pinfall, and walks out within 2.5 minutes. No. Now, I'm not saying that, a Keith Lee or Miro should come into the ring and Wardlow should squash him in 5 minutes. That's not, or 3 minutes. That's not what I'm saying. Have Wardlow go over, but make it a challenge for Wardlow. Don't make it easy on him. And, you bring in a guy like Miro, or you bring in a guy like Keith Lee once he comes back from injury, or Lance Archer, or Powerhouse Hobbs, these big, tough guys, you put them against Wardlow and see how Wardlow stacks up, man. Kind of test him and see if he can stack up and get these wins against, some of the top talent that you have on the AEW roster. I don't want to see that the next match Wardlow has after the statement that he made last night is another, enhancement talent or a local talent for the next town that, AEW happens to be in. I don't want to see that. I want to see top-notch talent against Wardlow as Wardlow is on his journey to challenge for the AEW World Championship. That's what I want to see. And I think that's exactly what Wardlow said last night. And that the fact that he was pissed off and he wants a challenge. He wants to be in the main event scene. He wants to be a main eventer. And I thought this was a great segment from Wardlow. So I definitely look forward to what's going to happen next with Wardlow in the future. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night. It is the main event of AEW's Dynamite. It is a 6-man tag team matchup. It is Hook teaming up with RVD and Adam Page versus Swerve, Brian Cage, and Samoa Joe. I thought this was a great main event, man. It was a really good matchup. I told a lot of stories in this match, to be honest with you. Back and forth matchup between both teams with Hook, RVD, and Page keeping the pace of the match. RVD hits a frog splash off the top rope. Page hits a buckshot lariat. Page then hits a powerbomb on Swerve through the announce table that looked absolutely brutal. Joe then hits a power slam on Page in the middle of the ring, but Joe applies a submission hold. And your winners of the match by submission are Swerve, Brian Cage, and Samoa Joe. Hats off to Swerve, Brian Cage, and Samoa Joe for getting the win in this matchup. A couple things I want to say about Dynamite and some of the news that I had, I got from Dynamite last night. And I kind of touched bases on this earlier, man. Let's start with Ric Flair. And I talked about this briefly. Ric Flair, joining them with the Young Bucks, I think is going to be a great thing. If that is a possibility. And again, Flair wanting to be in a more predominant role. I'm going to be honest with you guys, man. I think Flair, you have to ask yourself this question. When Sting has his last match on March 3rd, in Greensboro at Revolution, what's next for Flair? Is Flair going to walk away from AEW and pro wrestling after Sting is done? I don't know. So when Flair said that he's looking into his options, is this more for, long term for Flair in AEW? Is he going to align himself up with the Young Bucks? And this is kind of the long-term plan or the next 6-month plan for Flair after Sting's departure, after the match he has at Revolution, because it is Sting's last match. We don't know. Now, do I think Flair is going to completely go away from AEW once Sting leaves AEW? No. That's just the vibe I'm getting. I think Flair is going to be around for a little while. Maybe not every day or every month, but I think he'll be a part of AEW. I think Flair and what he's going to do, if again, it's just speculation, I think Flair is going to try to align himself up possibly with the Young Bucks, because you could see the Young Bucks, and like I said, the video packages that they have, arriving to the arena in flying in off a private jet, the nice cars, everything else, the heels that they are, the nice suits and everything else like that. It gives off Flair vibes, man. And so have Ric Flair kind of manage or mentor, if you will, the Young Bucks. Would be very interesting to see what happens with that if Flair does decide to align himself up with the Young Bucks. But I could see Flair getting involved in this last match for Sting, where he does put over the Young Bucks if he does align himself with the Bucks. I could see that, which would be crazy. It would be a crazy outcome to see Sting possibly lose at Revolution, especially it being his last match. But I would not be surprised, man. I would not be surprised. And obviously, we talked about it earlier with Wardlow in the segment that he had last night. It was fantastic, man. I think Wardlow, was pretty much shooting a shot, and he wanted to put the AEW locker room on notice. He wanted to put Tony Khan on notice to let him know that, you're missing the opportunity with me, man. I want to be a main eventer. I want to be in the main event spot. And Wardlow, like I said, he put everybody on notice. And I think if that's the case, Wardlow has to have top challenges. I don't want to see Wardlow after the segment that he had last night next week to have, face off against some local enhancement talent. I don't want to see that because you already dropped the ball literally after the great segment that you had last night from Dynamite. I don't want to see you go up against another enhancement talent at all. I want to see top challengers for Wardlow, as like I said, Wardlow is on this journey to become the new AEW World Champion. So I'm definitely looking forward to that. The other news that I want to talk about is the new hire from AEW. Now, if you guys don't know, AEW has hired Jennifer Pepperman to AEW. Now, you guys might be confused on who Miss Pepperman is. Pepperman, from what I understand, was a writer or a part of the writing team for WWE back in, I would say back in the day, but a couple years ago. She was one of the longest tenured writers for WWE. She worked exclusively with Vince McMahon and John Laurinaitis and Bruce Pritchard, a part of their writing team for WWE. And she had recently left WWE to pretty much get signed by AEW. Tony Khan had signed her on to AEW to be a part of the writing team. So it looks like Jennifer Pepperman is going to be working exclusively with Tony Khan and be a part of the writing team for AEW. To me, this is a big deal. This is a huge deal for AEW, a great signing for AEW. Obviously, from what I've been told, Jennifer Pepperman has had a lot of ideas with WWE, creatively for WWE during her tenure with WWE. So to see her over in AEW, obviously, Tony Khan took notice of this and wants to put more limelight into the creative and writing team for AEW. Now, AEW has hired a couple people to be a part of, the backstage business side of AEW. Now, that being Rocky Romero. They brought back QT Marshall after he previously left the company. Tony Khan brought him back into AEW. And now the hiring of Jennifer Pepperman as part of a VP of AEW content. So, again, this is one of those big signings in a way that could really help AEW. Now, the other interesting factor that you had to think about is two things. One, Jennifer Pepperman also worked with WWE as a part of the creative writing team for WWE, and AEW's possible addition of Mercedes Moné. Obviously, Moné probably had worked with Jennifer Pepperman during her time in WWE, so I think this was also something Tony Khan wanted to do to have a little bit more relaxation for Mercedes coming into AEW. But with that being said, with the addition of Mercedes Moné possibly, and bringing in Jennifer Pepperman as part of a VP of AEW content, this really could put a lot more limelight on the women's side of the AEW locker room, which I am all for that if that does happen. I mean, to me, and I mentioned this last week, if you're going to bring in someone like Mercedes and what she's done for WWE and the revolution that she created for the women's locker room for WWE and the matches that she had in WWE, whether it be NXT or WWE and the revolution that she had, bringing in someone like that, especially for this AEW women's locker room, this could be a new revolution for Mercedes Moné. I mean, AEW's women's side of the locker room is stacked, top to bottom. They have great talent from Britt Baker to Jamie Hayter, Julia Hart, Willow, Chris Statlander, Thunder Rosa. If you want to throw Abaddon in the mix, Shida, Rio. They have a lot of top talent right now for Tony Storm, Deonna Purrazzo as well. I didn't want to leave them out. They have a lot of top talent right now on the women's side of AEW. So you bring in someone like Mercedes. I know there was also speculation, and who knows where she's going to decide. And who I'm talking about here is Camille. Now, if you guys are not familiar with Camille, She's predominantly known for her time over in NWA. She was NWA Women's Champion for a long time, especially when Billy Corgan bought NWA and made it NWA Power. And she was a powerhouse for that company. She was a predominant champion, strong champion, and she did a hell of a job for NWA. But she is seeking free agency, and she kind of put a video out, if you will, I believe it was on Twitter, where she didn't really initially announce where she was going to go, but she did announce that it was down to one or two promotions, and it was WWE or AEW. Now, to me, and this is not me being biased, but I think Camille showing up in AEW would be fantastic. And it could very much happen. It could be that Camille is going over to WWE, to AEW to be a part of that women's roster, which would be fantastic. But again, with the addition of Jennifer Pepperman to be a part of AEW content, a part of the writing team, and she will be working with Tony Khan exclusively. I think it can only highlight the women's roster on AEW, which they need that desperately, and build storylines around the women on AEW. And I think bringing in someone like Jennifer Pepperman might actually help this idea to build around the AEW's women's locker room, especially with the possibility of the addition with Mercedes Moné coming over to AEW. So I think it's a win-win for AEW and Tony Khan, and I think it might be a humongous win for the AEW women's locker room as well, to bring a little bit more limelight to the women on AEW and maybe invest more storylines into the women's side of AEW, which I'm all for. And honestly, like I said, I'm not saying Mercedes was the catalyst for that, but I think with the addition possibly of Mercedes, I don't think Mercedes is going to just sit down and stand by and just let things be as they may. I think Mercedes is going to have a lot of input, not only with her character in AEW and matches that she has with AEW, but also the women's locker room as a whole for AEW. Because I think Mercedes is going to come in and be that locker room leader that the AEW women's locker room needs, in my honest opinion. And bringing back some names from injury like Jamie Hayter. Obviously Britt Baker's not injured, but bringing back Baker and have her back in the fold again. Statlander, Thunder Rosa's back now. Serena Deeb is back as well. Julia Hart when she comes back from injury. They have a top-notch AEW roster for the women. So to see, Mercedes come into that, man, it's going to be absolutely insane. And I think AEW, things are starting to heat up for AEW. I'm not saying they're back to what they were year one or year two. It's not what I'm saying, so let's pump the brakes on that. But with the addition of Jennifer Pepperman, maybe possibly adding another addition, maybe like a Scott D'Amore, it's possible. Then speaking of Scott D'Amore, there's a lot of TNA talent right now. I know there was a lot of speculation around Josh Alexander, who is a top competitor for TNA. He was also former TNA World Champion. Great competitor, great wrestler. But according to people that I talked to, that he's actually seeking free agency as well. So again, if I was Tony Khan, I would entertain the idea of bringing in, Scott D'Amore. I wouldn't, unless there's some kind of backstory to Scott for the reason why he was fired by, TNA and Anthem and stuff like that. But if Scott has no kind of, craziness going on, and, it's a clean bill for Scott D'Amore, if I was Tony Khan, I'd bring in a guy like Scott. Like I said, as long as Scott doesn't bring any issues or there's no, craziness stuff and, crazy stuff happening backstage or anything else like that, or he doesn't have some crazy backstory. Like I said, if it's a clean bill for Scott D'Amore, yeah, if I was Tony Khan, I would bring in a guy like Scott, because Scott has a lot of relationships with the TNA talent, and a lot of them have allegiance to Scott. And I think, bringing in a guy like Scott D'Amore to AEW would also bring in top talent from TNA over to AEW, like a Josh Alexander. I know Moose had a friendship with Scott D'Amore, and they were really good buddies when Scott was in TNA. So again, this could be something where if Scott goes over to AEW, could entice talent like Josh Alexander or Moose to possibly, once their contract is up in TNA, possibly go over to AEW. So, it's crazy, man. The how do I put that? The wrestling world right now is just crazy. Absolutely crazy. The other thing I want to talk about is Will Ospreay. Will Ospreay, supposedly, man, he had an insane match, and I didn't watch it, but I've heard a lot about it. He had a great match recently at Rev Pro, which was a fantastic matchup. Tony Khan was there. But Will Ospreay will be back in AEW. He's going to be back in AEW next week. Obviously, there was a matchup that was put in motion by Don Callis to have Takeshita versus Will Ospreay at Revolution. It'll be Ospreay's first match in AEW since he has signed a contract with AEW. So I'm definitely looking forward to that. It's going to be a sleeper match for Revolution for sure. But I'm excited, man. Will Ospreay is a great addition to AEW. And I'll tell you what, man, if everybody on AEW, both men and women, are all healthy, man, because they have a roster, man. The roster is stacked. Kenny Omega, Adam Cole, John Moxley, Bryan Danielson, Will Ospreay. There's a possible addition of Okada. I mean, come on, man. The roster is stacked. Absolutely stacked. So, and the other thing, too, I want to mention quickly about Jennifer Pepperman, the new addition to AEW. With her being a part of the writing team, it's also going to help Dynamite, Rampage, as well as Collision. So, and Collision needs it. I've mentioned to you guys multiple times about Collision. It's not that I hate Collision, but Collision needs to have more storylines around Collision, because if you're building a storyline on Collision, then I want to see that storyline advance into a pay-per-view matchup. And we're not getting that at all. So hopefully, with the addition of Miss Jennifer Pepperman to AEW as a part of VP of AEW content and the writing team, I'm hoping that Jennifer Pepperman does write for Collision as well, and bring more limelight to Collision and build storylines on Collision that will lead into a pay-per-view matchup. Which, that's all I can ask for as a fan, man. All I can ask for as a fan is to put a little bit more limelight into Collision, build storylines that make sense, and have those storylines pretty much lead into a pay-per-view matchup, which will be the last, straw for that storyline. You have all this build, all this storyline leading up to the pay-per-view, which is the final match, and then that's it. And that's what I want Collision to also be a part. I think, to me, honestly, Dynamite and Collision should be the top 1 and 2 shows of AEW. Not Rampage. It should be Dynamite number 1, Collision number 2. It's the same thing that WWE does with Raw and SmackDown. But honestly, for what it's worth, right now, Raw and SmackDown are kind of, on the same boat right now with all this storyline stuff going on with, obviously the Bloodline and stuff like that and Cody Rhodes. So, this will be that time for Tony Khan to actually hit the reset button and actually focus on storylines and focus on build and get more eyes on the product, man. You're bringing in Ospreay. Mercedes is coming. You also have the speculation of Okada possibly joining AEW as well. So, AEW is full steam ahead, and I want them to really focus and be fixated on building storylines leading up to the pay-per-view. And I think with the addition that AEW had last night with bringing in Jennifer Pepperman to be a part of the VP of AEW content, I'm all for it, man. I think it's a great addition to AEW, and I think that, hopefully she does a great job, and I think she will, to bring in a little bit more limelight into AEW and build storylines and have a little bit more creative when it pertains to AEW. So I'm all for it. But with that being said, this is my review of AEW's Dynamite. I hope you guys are out there staying safe. Be careful.